So as you probably know, I'm the youngest of 8 boys, and the next 2 older brothers are Mike and Jim. And when they were in college, they were pre-med. One wanted to be a surgeon, one wanted to be a veterinarian. And I looked up to them, and they were wonderful. And but I was thinking to myself, in all humility, that I was probably given more natural intelligence than them. In all humility. And was wondering what to do with my life. Well, should I use it for something like that? You know, and I had to figure out, you know, what my life was about and how I was going to live my life. But we have the call of the apostles today. You got to think, you know, you've got 12 different men that God called. Some were probably quick to the draw, and some were maybe slower to the draw. Some were probably more extroverted, some were probably more introverted, some were more probably readily able to smile, and some were probably more serious. All these different kind of personalities and gifts that they had, but nonetheless, God called them all. Nonetheless, God called them all, you and me, to share in that good news. With our gifts, our limitations, our histories, our personalities, but that's who God uses. And in the first reading today, we read about Jonah calling the Ninevites back to God, to his life and his way of life. And when we come back to God, beautiful things happen. It's always beauty when we come to God, because God is beautiful. God is good. Today, we have a special gift. Jessica's here to share with us. She's actually from Tucson, Arizona, and she's going to share with us about God's call in her life, and the acceptance of that call and the beauty that came from her turning to God and continuing to turn to God in her life as she followed God. And Jessica, and I want to introduce her husband too, Patrick. Here's Jessica and Patrick. So welcome, and I'm going to turn over the mic to Jessica. She shares. So let's welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning, and I've been very blessed over my 31 years, with Patrick, for having the opportunity to speak in 20 different countries and be here, of course, with you this morning with my husband Patrick and my friend Christine. I don't come to Portland very often. This is really one of the special occasions. And as you can see, I don't have any arms, and this is the way I was born, so I've been this way my entire life. It's not something that was genetic. It was nothing. I didn't lose my arms in something traumatic or disease or anything like that. This is how I was born. And I have to tell you, though, it's sometimes a funny experience because it can be awkward when meeting people for the first time. Because naturally, we like to shake hands. And sometimes people come up to me and they're not sure what exactly to do. And once in a while, I'll have a funny thing happen. One day, I remember a kid came up to me to meet me, and he shook my imaginary hand. And another time, I remember a couple times when my husband's with me, they'll be shaking my husband's hand, but looking at me. So it's interesting, and for me, it's somewhat entertaining at times. When I first met Father John yesterday morning, he just fully embraced me, so there was no awkwardness about that at all. But I want to share with you a little bit about my life, what I can in a few minutes, and most importantly, the message that I have to share with you this morning. Was there ever a time when you felt as though you were missing something? Have you ever felt incomplete in some way? Not thin enough? Good looking enough? Tall enough? Maybe not rich enough? I know we've all felt that one at some point. In a society that is insistent on the image of perfection, it's easy to not feel enough. When a baby's born, you count the 10 fingers and 10 toes. As a woman, we obsess over weight. Males, sometimes it's height or build. And we are surrounded by ads of models who are digitally enhanced. And there's a whole industry dedicated to beauty. It makes it very difficult to celebrate individuality, especially with the need to compare ourselves to others around us. And it makes it especially difficult when you're born different, whether it's a disability or you just feel different in some way. And I remember growing up how difficult it was. After my parents got over the initial shock of my not having arms, there were still many challenges that they were faced with. My mom would tell me the stories of bringing me to the grocery store and putting me in the shopping cart and going around the store, and all she would hear is, "Oh, poor little girl," at which she would assure them, "Don't feel sorry for her, she'll be just fine." Or my dad, who would proudly say, "I never once shed a tear about Jessica's birth condition." He never saw me as a victim, and therefore I could never see myself as a victim. Yes, I was truly blessed with wonderful parents in my life, but yet I still struggled with my own difference. As I was growing up, I started to look around and see my older brother and younger sister, friends, family, everyone in my small town community, and they all had hands and arms. And so I'd often go up to my mom and I would ask her, "Why did God make me this way?" At which she would tell me, "God has a plan for you." I remember my first dance recital. I started taking tap dance lessons at the age of 6, and at the very end of dance, at the end of the year, Maxine, my dance teacher, announced to all of the class that we were going to have a performance in front of all our family and friends. And I didn't want to be any bit a part of that. I didn't want anyone staring at me, especially being in the spotlight. So I went home to Mom and I told Mom, "Mom, can we talk to Maxine and tell her that I don't want to be in the dance recital?" And she agreed, and the next day we went to dance class, and my mom and Maxine talked, and I remember seeing them over in the corner talking to each other. And somehow they convinced me to buy my dance costume anyway, just as a souvenir. And a couple days later, I found myself out there on stage. And I told Maxine, I said, "Okay, fine, I'll go out, I'll perform, as long as I'm in the back row." She told me there wasn't going to be a back row. So I gathered enough courage. I remember going out there, looking down at my tap shoes, and I went through the routine until the first round of applause, and my eyes started to lift, and I started to have confidence. And I was very fortunate that my dance teacher and Mom encouraged me to go out that day, because I danced for 14 years after that. And I wouldn't be here in front of all of you if it wasn't for my experience with dance. But yet, going back to my preteen years, it was still very difficult. Despite the confidence that dance helped me with, I still struggled. I wanted to blend in like everyone else. That's a typical preteen thing to do. And I wanted to go unnoticed. I didn't want anyone staring at me. And it was very difficult. When we have this need to compare ourselves and we feel the pressures of conformity, we often forget that in God's eyes, we are perfect. And that's something I had to learn. In our need to feel enough, to feel complete, to feel whole, all we have to do is remember that our Creator has created us perfect, and just as He has intended to. And those times when we feel low and we feel like it's difficult, all we have to do is remember that Jesus Christ came and He gave His life to us. We are enough. And He comes to us in the Eucharist every Mass, which is so special. We are enough. We are worth it. And He often tells us that. Sometimes we just don't listen well enough. My favorite passage in the Bible from Psalm 139:13, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I am fearfully and wonderfully made." Undoubtedly, even more difficult than the physical challenges of not having arms, learning how to get dressed, becoming a black belt in Taekwondo, becoming the first armless pilot to fly an airplane with my feet and get a Guinness World Record for that. even more difficult than all of those physical challenges was the challenge, the emotional challenge of self-acceptance and of greater faith. A journey that each of us has to take. And for me, it wasn't until 8th grade till I made the most important decision of my life, because for 11 years I wore prosthetic arms to school. And I have nothing against prosthetics. It's wonderful what they've been able to do for people who've lost limbs, veterans coming back, or people who've lost limbs due to disease or trauma. But for me, it was more natural to do things with my feet because this is the way I was born. And so all I did was wear those prosthetics due to the pressures of conformity. But on that first day of 8th grade, I remember leaving those fake arms behind. And for the first time in 11 years, I walked to the bus stop feeling freer, lighter, because they weighed about 10 pounds, more empowered than I'd ever felt in my entire life. I made the decision that this is exactly how God has intended me to be. And when those bus doors shut, I knew that there was going to be rejection. Kids would make fun of me, they would talk, people would point and stare, but it didn't matter because I was going to be exactly who God intended me to be. And when the bus doors shut, I promised myself I would never again wear them. To this day, they remain in the closet. I want to ask each and every one of you, what are your own fake arms? Remember, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139:13, for you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you.
Let's say a prayer. Just extend our hands out over Jessica and Patrick. Lord, we thank you for Jessica and how she has chosen you, chosen your life and your love, and just to share you with the world that we are fearfully and wonderfully made in you. And help us to accept that and just to glory in that you love us and that you're with us. And we shall be at peace in that. May you continue to work through Jessica and Patrick and all those who help them just to share your good news and your love. We thank you for being blessed this day and bring them always to the fullness of your life this day and forever. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.